yourself when what mortals are up against is one thing simply: thoughts. If you're not physically wounded, then all that afflicts you is thoughts. This is simple to say and easy to hear, but once back in the land of thoughts, impossible to remember. Those who believe the mind fragile err, for as long as a man is filled with thoughts, the strength of the mind rivals that of the largest muscle. With about the equal intelligence. I know I'm not supposed to be adding personal comments to the news, but I was just thinking they're so close together. How could you tell the difference, between a bicep and your mind? And you say, on the basis of density? Huh? Oh, intelligence. Oh, well, all right. So long as you believe that some of the thoughts that pass through your mind are better or worse or truer or untruer than others, there is simply no way out. You will forever remain captive, immersed, magnetically held by your thoughts. And sad thing is, they're not even yours to begin with. Only the warrior knows that if you trip and hurt yourself when distracted, that you deserve it. And only he who knows it does. The reason that mystical optometrists are so seldom in their office is that they will stick a deserving patient in the eye only once for the same complaint. Above the subatomic level, the best example of the cohesiveness of matter is that of the mind and thoughts. A state wherein this is not so is unnatural and the haunt of the few. Dreamers of the Enlightenment imagine that it is a matter of having the knowledge to achieve it, whereas the truth is that it is all a simple matter of strength, if you call going against the natural order of things and attempting the impossible a matter of strength. I wonder if that's why they're so close together, so that they can make little group photos. Men in captivity will not perform as good as those who believe themselves free. And if everyone in captivity is not aware of it, then no one is. Even the ordinary who periodically proclaim that they feel they're in prison always look in the irrelevant direction when they say it. Gravity holds men physically to earth. Thoughts do him mentally. To want to be more conscious than everyone else is a young man's game. To achieve it, an older one's. So much so, in fact, that most of the young ones soon give it up. As harmless as may seem, talking to yourself reinforces the feeling that your thoughts arise from you. Impotent tyrants need not be propped up to survive. They naturally rule. As long as slaves keep looking and pointing at areas away from the fields, they are securely captive. The ultimate trick in discovering the secret is to know where to look. Knowledge not available in any book or weekend seminar. One guy's tighter wrap-up of a recent hardball game, quoting, "The way I see it is that not only should you not listen to anyone, but especially so your own thoughts. Okay, out of these sweaty clothes and into the showers." End quote. Eden and the plantation. It is only after man leaves the silent garden of the old nonverbal brain and enters the noisy, thoughtful one of the higher areas that he becomes aware of his captivity. Thoughts are partisan, always either in support of or in opposition to whatever it is they're thinking about. This keeps the routine mental world properly running, but does nothing for a man's struggle for understanding. As regards the great hidden secret, it's not all that secret. Even the mountains, the trees, the stars, and the birds are constantly yelling out about it. It's just that you can't hear them as long as you're thinking about it. And of your rights, I don't care how you keep repackaging it. I hear quite well what you're saying, and I say that what you're talking about is no less than a man attempting to hold his breath forever. And why do you so persist when you know damn well that it cannot be done? Sincerely. From his view, he is correct. And yet, the secret continues to call. Once you plainly see what it is that keeps you where you are, you'll then understand why all criticism is to be avoided. All? Yes, all. And having nothing to do with questions regarding the justification of the criticism, but rather with the adhesive nature of that activity that criticizes. Push and pull makes the world go round, but push and pull keeps a good mind down. Here's the way it went. Here's the way it went. As soon as thoughts realized how uncontrollable, self-serving, and circular they are, they concocted the ideas of gods, demons, destiny, and fate to cover it up. Either that, or it happened when men realized it about their thoughts. Which, in either possibility, is a pretty sorry state of affairs. Well, that is, if you ever happen to become aware of it. Otherwise, no problem. On the positive side of man's captivity is the fact that his slave master seems to be deaf, dumb, and blind, and totally impartial toward him. Man is born twice. He has a physical birth and a mental one as well. Thoughts, same as food, raise and nourish him. And same as food, they can distress and discomfort him. And along with the body, attend his death. Thoughts are, all in all, a lifetime nurse and mother, never receiving adequate recognition. There is a footnote to this. Thoughts accomplish all that was noted, but only if you're satisfied to live your life as a mechanical toy, which obviously most are. Men can dislike each other on sight, or only after becoming aware of one another's thinking. Either one is equally valid or not so, and both irrelevant to demagnetized consciousness. Through religion, the psychiatric and occult arts, men attempt to heal, or remodel at least, their thoughts. And the reason it never works is quite simple. Thoughts cannot be repaired. It is against their nature and physical structure. What men are in truth unknowingly about is something else entirely, and something so at odds and foreign to thought as to be generally incomprehensible to it. The history of the mystery, never written, is that most who undertake it give up before they ever realize its simplicity. Thus, all out beating the bushes and their chests, proclaiming the occult complexity of the struggle, are those who long ago abandoned it. From one view, there is something to be said, if in an imaginary battle, for believing that you are faced with a multitudinous opponent. It makes resignation more tolerable. No. If men could look at their minds in the same way they can their stomachs, there would be no such things as mental problems. But since they can't, tough shit, take off your shorts, and call the doctor. Now for this. What it takes to remain in the dark. The stupid never get it. So all you got to do is stay stupid. I did not misread that. Only when you personally see thoughts for what they are can you lose all interest and dependence on them. Not a weekend or decade undertaking. Avura writes, I hear you use the term mental indifference and suspect that you mean more than you're literally saying. Am I correct? Sincerely. And a really good viewer knows that I always mean more than I say. The feeling men periodically have of not liking themselves comes from their being too close to themselves mentally. Forget familiarity breeding contempt. Proximity breeds blindness. When a visitor to Earth learned that one of man's best loved inspirational hymns was one entitled, I'm too close now to ever turn back, he mused. Nice try, but knowing them, they got the point of the song backwards. To say that the struggle for enlightenment is to have consciousness that is not dependent on thought strikes most minds as foolishness, and thus is seldom so described. There is no such thing as sequentially coherent memory, or else man could not tolerate his thinking. A simple, comprehensive survey of his thinking would drive him mad. Which opens the door to a new definition of enlightenment. The ability to rationally absorb the insane. There was one mystical school that went by the name of, Conductor, stop that train. The very best that the mind can do is to look metaphorically. But even then, it can never see beyond the boundaries of its own sight. Thoughts have not only taken man to his singular heights, but also caused him to absolutely believe that they are capable of that of which they are not. A reasonable price, some might say, but not the few. The subject of behavior is moot to a thermostat. Only the awakened know the correct temperature. Everyone knows, yet no one knows that a machine can never know itself. Without consciousness glued to thought, there is nothing humorous. Thus, those who know must fake being funny. It is the boxcars hooked together that are silly, not the space between them. The benefit of being a warrior is in being alert. And if you're not, then you're not one. Now, are you? Huh? You could explain what this is all about until atoms wear out, and still the mind will say, huh? There was once a mystical kennel by the name of Down Boy, Down. What say we go on and get down to the gritty nitty of it? What say? Trying to drag your consciousness off of the eternal, natural, mechanical, magnetic merry-go-round is like trying to drag a merry-go-round off of a merry-go-round. Go figure. Of course, there is nothing to figure, but you can still go if you want to. The recognition of the opposition. When you finally realize what you're really up against, you realize that your problem all along has been that you've been right up against something. Your thoughts. Talk and the question of direction. If you talk in circles.
Yeah.
Some things in this universe are intended to run automatically and some are not. But still, everything in this universe runs automatically. A few get it, most never do. Corollary, you cannot partially disembark a merry-go-round. A voice in the dark said, "I just love it when you talk dirty to me." And the man replied to his thoughts, "I wasn't talking dirty to you." And they said, "Yeah, but you were trying to resist me," which is the same thing. And the man rolled over and tried to wake up. Mental indifference is a powerful energy, so much so that men can scarcely bear it. And lastly, might I suggest that if all of the mystics of history had a common, unstated motto, it would be, no comment. Picking up less or more where we were last time. There is a fairly common phrase that is used now on television news shows of all sorts. And the teasers and the openers and the promos for the news show itself or some of these news magazines. And sometimes in the headlines or the covers in print media. It will say, stay tuned or read this issue. And perhaps they will mention some specific subject and perhaps not. It's just a common sort of a sales slogan, advertising jingle for some news shows, but it says, stay tuned tonight where we'll bring you not only the news, but explain to you how it will affect your life. For those of you who might be semi-virgins to this program, we're not making fun of the news. The only reason I bring up any of this, besides for some other point that is not literal, is if for nothing else, is to ask yourself what dynamics that men do not normally recognize are at work in life that make such things viable, that make such things a continuing part of his life. That being, I assume you didn't get the point yet, so I'll have to do that real quick when I brought that up. Being this, stay tuned for this important story on whatever it is, cancer research or a change in the prime rate of interest, a new prime minister in Slovenia. They say, but stay tuned for this because we bring you not only the news, not only this important story, not just the raw facts, not just the news, but we will explain to you how it will affect your life. Well, what kind of importance is something if somebody got to explain to you how it's going to affect your life? I repeat for you newcomers that we're not attacking the news because religion has been doing the same thing long before we had anchor men with coats and ties. It was back when you had anchor people who were actually fishermen. Religion has always done it, but now just a prime example, a good one, of which you're all aware, and the reason I enjoy some of these, if you hear it so common, I assume all of you turn on radio or TV at times, or you read some news media and print, and now it is so common that you no longer even hear it. But it is used as a continuing promo. And it seems contemporary, and it would appear to be something new since the whole idea of the news being commonly available to the masses on an instant basis, that is, in some of your lifetime, or at least your grandparents' lifetime, that kind of news coverage. But it's an old story of somebody announcing to you that there's important things going on. Like I said, religion has been doing it forever. It's been one of the spokesmen, one of the outlets for this kind of energy flowing from life through man, of someone announcing that there is something important that you don't know, some news that I'll be glad to tell you. Come here in the mosque or the temple or the church, but you need to hear this. And we're not only going to tell you the news, but I am going to explain to you the impact, the effect that this is going to have on your life. And people's always been hearing that from life. And people will, according to how they're wired up and where the source seems to be their religion, or whether it's the right temperature that day. But at any rate, people have, without exception, been flocking, been showing up for those announcements. And people continue now, if not to specifically go turn on the news. They might if they hear the story that there's some major breakthrough in the treatment of alcoholism. Maybe some woman, got a sot for a husband and thinks, well, maybe I better watch this. And she doesn't really need to hear it, but they may say it's some brand new research that has been going on for the last 20 years at such and such university has just been released today that may prove the breakthrough for which we have all been waiting in the treatment, if not the cure, of alcoholism or breast cancer, or whatever the hell it is. And they say, so stay tuned, we'll be back in 2 minutes and explain to you not only what this is. And it can be all the way from that to them saying that it's new road construction. And we'll be up in our helicopter, the newscopter, and we'll be not only showing you the new construction, where it's going to be, but we will explain to you how this upcoming road construction will affect your life. All right, all the way from that to God's got it in for you, everything. You are simply, if you notice, man's mind is constructed in such a way, the collective network of human consciousness is constructed in such a way that there's always someone, there's always a voice pointing out something here's something that you probably didn't know. Hark. And people are given to hearken. Hearkening, I should say. And people go, yes. And they will also say, not only are we presenting, or not only will reveal to you this new raw data, or the facts. We'll not only bring you the news about this important new research or this new government program, but we will explain to you the effect it will have on your life. You will probably never be the same, all that kind of stuff. Be sure, stay tuned. You certainly don't want to miss it. I ask you again, what kind of importance, to use their modifier, this important story, but what kind of importance is something if some person, and I don't care how qualified or unqualified, but that some person looks you dead in the eye, or looks humanity dead in the eye, that is, humans looking each other dead in the eye, and they say, I've not only got something to tell you, some news, but I will explain to you the effect it's going to have on your life. People say, huh? Of what importance is something if someone's got to explain to you the effect it's going to have on your life? Now, if that is not clear enough, having very little immediate recourse than to delve into that which I'm sure will produce some guffaws, because it appears to be ironic at least, but that's not the intent of it. If something was really of importance, for instance, if a newscaster walked outside or somebody said, did you know there's something very large up in the sky and I've been noticing it for the last 30 minutes? And the newscaster walked outside, and for some reason nobody else, well, at any rate, he walks outside and notices. And he has the wherewithal to recognize that, by God, is a meteor. And even as I stand here, having fairly good sight, it is increasing at an alarming rate in its visual size. In other words, the man, either that or he looks up and he goes, wait a minute, I've seen pictures, that's an atomic bomb. And it's coming down very swiftly. And he runs back in there and he breaks in the news and he gets on the air and he grabs a mic and he says, listen, I got some really important news for you. I think even humans in general, would admit that that might be, at the very least, somewhat superficial, somewhat unnecessary for him to say, wait a minute, I got some real news Plus, you know me as always. It's not only news. Anyway, I got to talk fast. It's not only news, but as you know how we do here on Channel 4, I'm not only going to give you the story, but I will tell you how it's going to affect your life. You do understand that if a bomb is within minutes of hitting, or a meteor, there's no need to explain. The point being, if a story actually has an effect, and now we're talking about an absolutely inescapable real effect as opposed to those that are open to some further question. It would have to be a real effect for me to make this distinction for the sake of our discussion. What do you call a discussion when it's a monologue? Mind your own business. Could be a discussion. Maybe I know a definition of discussion that you don't know. In fact, I know I do, but I'm sure you don't want to hear it because people who think that what normally goes on here is sometimes spooky, you don't hear the other one. All right. If it is a story that actually is going to affect your life, and by the distinction I'm drawing right now, it would have to be something that would affect your chances of survival. It would have to be at the biological level as opposed to the psychological. No one has to explain that. If they say, if a newscaster comes on and let's say that you live in some small area and you live off of potatoes, 9% of your diet, you and everybody else potatoes, and they say, it has just been announced that this year's potato crop amounts to 0. We have nothing at all to eat. Stay tuned and I will explain to you the effect this is going to have on your life. Nobody. You don't need to hear it. That 9% of your food stuff, your daily calories, day in and day out, comes from potatoes. And they suddenly announce there are no potatoes. There are no potatoes. We don't even have promise of potatoes. We're out of potatoes. The man is not going to say, and be sure and stay tuned, for more details. Plus, we will explain to you the effect this may have on your life. No. Why is this? Why does this dynamic? When I assume you get the point now, that it is, to say the least, unnecessary. Because if indeed this news story, this information that they're going to provide, if it indeed will have just go along for the word for a few minutes, a real effect, if it's going to have an inescapable, discernible, survival tinge, I don't mean that it has to be threatening, impending death, but that it actually touches on the matters of survival, such as food. No one would have any interest, it would not even strike the newscaster to say, etc., stay tuned and we'll explain the effect it will have. It's not even open to discussion. That would be the absolute, there would be no better example of the superfluous. But if it is not directly, vis-a-vis my description, my example of the famine, the impending famine, if it is not directly survival-based, if it does not touch on matters having to do with the physical survival of you, of man, then all of the news must be explained as to why it should be of even any imagined significance. That's why no one notices, do you understand, that it turns on itself. It turns inside out and eats itself before your very eyes while the little children and the adults stand there looking in the cage thinking, what a cute, cute specimen, and believing they see it while the thing, in plain view, in front of everyone, is consuming itself inside out. It was not there to begin with, and now it has eaten itself on top of that. And people still stand there and they nudge each other and say, "Aw," they swoon, "Aw." And then somebody comes by from the zoo saying, "Well, if you'll wait another 5 minutes, I'll be doing one of my hourly lectures explaining to you the importance, the effect, what you have just seen will have on your life." And people begin to say, can we wait another 5 minutes? People think, do I have a choice? Can I afford to leave? Two of the news items. Men in captivity will not perform as good as those who believe themselves free. And if everyone in captivity is not aware of it, then no one is. Through religion, the psychiatric and occult arts, men attempt to heal or remodel their thoughts. And the reason it never works is quite simple. Thoughts cannot be repaired. It is against their nature and physical structure. Every piece of information apparently passed from one man to another is on the basis, other than the actual technology of survival. That is, one man telling another man, listen, those potato seeds you got? The other guy goes, yeah. He goes, they work best if you stick them in the ground rather than just keep them in your pocket or lay them on the kitchen table. Other than that kind of information, all other information is on the basis, although it's never described as such, it's on the basis of the information being assumed. It's proclaimed, it's thought to be by the one offering the information or the advice, and for those who actively pursue it or accept it, it is assumed by them to be for the purposes of, in some way, repairing thought. And it is called everything that about covers it in the news item, from religion to the psychiatric and mystical arts, the occult arts. Everything from astrology to psychiatry, to religion, to marriage counseling, to just good old common sense advice from one person to another. The only advice ever offered, remember now we're above the survival level. We're not talking about one man saying, by the way, when you get cut bad like that, it's real good, I found, is to take something and try and stop the bleeding. Other than that sort of thing, everything else, all advice, all new information, the news itself is on the basis given and the acceptance of the assumption, the hope that it will in some way repair thinking. It is, from a quite non-prejudicial way, it is easy enough for anyone who can withhold any judgment for any length of time, to see that nothing in the world of man, above the bio survival limit, nothing actually works. Religion, that is, nothing succeeds by its own stated goals. Not ours, not mine, but every organization, all of human activity, the singular human activity, above the survival level, they all state goals. Everything from a Irish Poetry Society lover society to a major religion, to a political organization, to an alumni of a university, to a university itself. All human activities that has any extended life, enough that they take on a public form, they have a stated goal. And no organization, no human activity, period, there's no exception. If you can find them, help yourself. Press on. No human activity, by its own definition, by its own stated goal, ever succeeds. It's not criticism, it's a fact. Religion never succeeds, no religion succeeds. Psychiatry does not succeed. Peneology does not succeed. Nothing succeeds. That it states our goal is to do so and so. And you ask them later, be it a year, 1,000 years later, if there's someone that can speak for it, or someone involved who has something resembling, momentarily, some balanced view, something just anywhere close to an ephemeral, objective reaction, and you say, well, by the way, your goal is to make man a perfect creature, yes? Well, what kind of success rate are you having? Well, we don't really have success rate. I mean, can you find somebody to me that's made perfect? Well, no. There's someone who is in charge of a criminologist, someone who studies, someone who makes recommendations. You say, what kind of success rate do you have in taking criminals by your definition or by society's definition? What success do you have? I mean, have you found a way now to take people who seem bent, who have proven themselves to be bent on a criminal life, to go against whatever the rules and the laws are, and that you have now found some way to correct that, to stop it? Well, no, we hadn't. That's a fact. Anyone who defends it, anyone who says otherwise in the field, just taking a serious nap, or else you were too accusatory. They simply do not work. They do not succeed. Would you like to? The reason that they never succeed is simply not stupidity, not lack of education, not lack of experience. What else am I leaving out to be the normal reactions? That usually does it. That it's lack of information, that is lack of knowledge. They hadn't been around long enough. But like religion, you can say, well, how long has the church been here? And somebody said 2,000 years. Or you can ask, how long has Western psychiatry been in existence? And I guess most people would date it Freud onward, and they'd say, well, we're talking about a good 90 years now, which is not to be sneezed at. And so but they're normal if you say, well, can you succeed? Does your field, can you reach the goals that your field states, that your activity states is its purpose? Does it work? No, it does not. That's a simple fact. And you say, well, can you explain why after 1,000 years, 100 years, 50 years? Why does it not work? Or in an individual case, if you ask by the way, since I went as far as 1,000 and as short as 100 with Freud, what if it's something even more recent? Whatever it would be. But if it's some human endeavor even more recently, or even an individual psychiatrist, and you say, well, the psychiatry in general, can it fulfill its aims? And the guy says, no. He's not just looking at the fact that we only have 100 years of experience. This is really pushing it, but if he was intelligent at all, if he had any objective insight, you could ask him, or else it would strike him, well, even 100 years, me believing 100 years is not sufficient time for which psychiatry to achieve a position wherein it can succeed. It should strike him, speaking theoretically, of course, it should strike him that, wait a minute, forget the 100 years in psychiatry as a movement or as a whole discipline. I spent 20 years or 12 years in school, and I have been in active practice 20 years, and I can't succeed. His feeling, again, just speaking between you and I from a different view, if a man had any intelligence, forget his IQ and forget his education, it should strike him, screw the fact that psychiatry has only had 100 years. What if it had 5,000 years? I can't succeed at it, and I've just been doing it less than one lifetime. That if a man had any sort of intelligence, again, speaking very theoretically, it should strike him and him close up his office and walk off. The point being, as obscure as it may have gotten, is the excuse normally, or the explanation normally is that the activity is not of sufficient age. And like I said, you can always scoff at because the church would be faced with 2,000 years. Philosophy would be faced with at least 5,000 years. And so you can laugh and say, well, and ask a philosopher. And he goes, well, we've only been doing this. Give us a break. And you go, wait a minute. There's written records, some of the oldest written records. The man was obviously a philosopher. You go, yeah. That's 5,000 years ago. How long do you people want? Well, it is not just the time. But they would normally, that is the normal explanation as to why a field cannot succeed. Lack of knowledge. And they can expand that or flip it over to lack of experience. So we just haven't been here long enough. That is not why it does not work. That is not why human activities cannot achieve their own aims, because their aims are always misstated. or put more directly, their aim is never correctly stated. Because what religion, psychiatry, politics, other than at the survival level, territorial disputes, but the idea of politics, the idea of government, the idea of economics, not actual survival of having food to eat, but economics. All of the world of these ideas, all of them, none of them ever state the purpose correctly, because their purpose is to repair thoughts. Once you see it, it's simple. If you went out to get help in life and you had some sort of straightforward view of life, that you were almost conscious without being encumbered with the stupidity of everyone else, including yourself, and you were going to seek help, there's only two kinds of help you would seek, no matter how you try it. You either need physical help or non-physical help. That's all there is. You can ask somebody, you can find a line and say, would you pull that thorn out of my foot? Or however the story goes. Or ask someone, would you repair my tractor so I can plant some potatoes now that I know the seeds go in the ground? Would you bind my wound? Would you give me something to eat? Would you let me come in your cave and get out of the elements? It's either physical help or the other help is non-physical. The other help then in people's minds splinters into a myriad of areas, and it does not. It's one thing. You're asking for help with your thoughts. And it goes all the way from my thoughts frighten me. So you might seek out a rabbi or a priest who goes, that's all right, things will be fine. Or you feel like my thoughts are broken, they're hurt. And so you go seek out a psychiatrist. Or you might seek out a public metaphysician, an astrologer, a faith healer, a shaman of some kind. But what you're asking for, what you're saying is, the first basis is clear enough, the physical. If you need help, it's very likely, obvious in fact, if you actually need help enough, that if you weren't just some wimp, if you weren't just a village whiner, if you actually need physical help, it's very likely that the person to whom you went to seek help would recognize it. That is, you'd be bleeding, you'd look emaciated, you would look weather-beaten. That if you actually needed help to the point that you sought help, it's very likely, that's not necessary, but it's very likely it would be obvious. I would suggest amongst fairly rational people, decent men and women of some wherewithal, probably in the high 90% of the time, it would be obvious that if you had to seek help, if it was to the point that you had to seek help, I need outside assistance, it would show. Again, it's not necessary, but it's just very likely. The only other area in which you would go to seek help is you're not hurt physically, you're not wounded, you're not sick, you're not overcome by the elements, you're not overcome by physical forces. The other one is just what it says, non-physical. But people describe their soul, their psychology, their psyche, their relationships. God knows what else they've come up with. But it all sounds like that you're speaking at least of different shades of various areas of the human psychic drama. And you're not. You're just talking about one thing. There's only one thing isolating the overall life of life itself in an arbitrary manner, in a artificial manner, because life is doing it internally to itself. But be that as it may, a man who seeks help, a man who goes to a priest, a man who goes to an astrologer, anyone seeking any non-physical help does so on one basis. You can forget soul, psychology, everything else. It's just obvious as hell once you see it. It's almost impossible to see. But there's one thing hurting you, and that's your thoughts. They're hurting you, they're frightening you, they're disturbing you. It's all the same thing. But that's generally, that'd probably be the two easiest. That cover most people's attitude toward it, is they're either frightened or they feel they're hurt. I feel like either my soul is aching or else my soul is frightened. I either need reassurance. My thoughts, even though they won't call it this, my thoughts are frightening me. Only people fear death. And it's simple to explain on this planet because only people know that death is coming. So if you don't know that death is coming, you cannot talk to a hippopotamus and say, I've noticed you have a pretty devil-may-care attitude. You go, look here, big boy. I know you look in robust health. I see you got 2 or 3 fine-looking mamas there. Some nice little hippo kitties. Your own water hole. I'm going to tell you what, you cocky son of a bitch. You fat son of a bitch. You're going to die. I mean, you think you're king of the water hole now, but someday you're going to die. And within days, you'll begin to rot, and the vultures and the hyenas will get you. You'll waste away to nothing. And within weeks, your family will have forgotten you. And the hippo will still go. Then you realize, wait a minute. He wasn't doing all that in reaction to what I've been talking about. He hadn't even been listening. He just naturally cockier. Maybe he's got a tick. I know it seems obvious, and I've done it before, but you do aware that I'm not bringing this up for the matter of hippos. People take death. They do not take death seriously as much as they take the fear of death seriously. And so they can say, well, the fear of death, and they can give you all sorts of explanation. You go, why are you so frightened with death? And you know that you're just asking for it. I mean, they can begin to go off into all sorts of pseudo-metaphysical rehashes of religion and all sorts of things, or they can just say, well, I don't know, it's the knowledge of death is upon me so much, and they will normally, well, they will, at exception, have something outside themselves. They'll say, my mother died such a hideous death from throat cancer, or my father wasted away from lung cancer, let's say. Something. They'll go, and it had such an impact on me, it is like a fear of death, just, it has darkened. It's like a shadow on my soul. And I know it's unreasonable, I shouldn't worry that much about it, but I cannot shake it. It's just, what are they talking about? Now it sounds like that's always the case. You know how the mind does because it cannot look at itself. Of course, the truth is it can't look at itself objectively, but you could talk like that forever and people won't argue with it. It can't look at itself. I just throw in objectively because it gives most people a way out and then go, objectively. And so they don't worry with it. The mind can't look at itself. You tell people that, they go, well, you're crazy. It sure can. So, to save them a useless wear and tear on their little brain, I say such things as the mind cannot look at itself objectively. Because it sounds like, well, wait a minute, that's open to some discussion. That modifier helps, see? Modifier is like a trap door on an ironclad suit of union wear. See, people think trap doors are put on union suits to make the process of elimination easier for those so confined. But mentally, man also has a union suit. And the trapdoor in this case, not simple for the sake of physical defecation, but for the sake of his mind being able to go, come on, now wait a minute. That's what modifiers are for, so that you don't poke a man directly in the eye unless he came and asked for it. See, it takes a real mystical, myopic person to actually show up at a transcendentalist optometrist office, if they can catch him in there. And the complaint, but again I point out for those of you that's trying to save you some time, the reason that they're so seldom in the office is because they're only going to treat you once. They're only going to react to it once. But if someone stumbles in the office and this non-standard optometrist, since he specializes in sight, he recognizes this is not a true, serious patient. They simply want to talk about it. And see, with them, you don't really punch them in the eye. You say, open up, and they go, up, and then you go, And then you go, do you feel better? And they go, yeah, well, that helped a lot. See, that's what modifiers are. Did anybody follow that? Huh? If I said the mind cannot look at itself, that's a poke in the eye. And people they'll stagger out metaphorically and go, oh, that's crazy. Because their mind can say, well, right now I'm looking at my mind thinking that, so I can obviously look at my mind. So you say, the mind cannot look at itself objectively. And then people go, So therefore, instead of sticking them in the eye, you go, You go, huh? They go, well, I'll think about it.
Yeah.
They'll get up and leave. They won't pay their bill, but they'll get up and leave. They'll promise you a check in the mail. All of this speaking allegorically, of course, maybe. People say that they fear death, that the fear of death is upon them. To that, or people say that they have, that their mind is driving them crazy because they're involved with some kind of idée fixe that they keep, that their heart has been broken, that they cannot get over not only their wife leaving them or husband, but when they got to the door and they turned around and said, by the way, for the last 20 years, I have hated your guts, and worse than that, I thought you were a laughing stock, but I wanted to get the kids raised. I have hated your guts for 20 years. Bye. And he or she smiles and closes the door, and the person says, I know I should get over it, but there's not an hour goes by that does not stay on me. So in the first case, someone might go seek out a priest. Some in the religious field, that the fear of death was on me. That's not what they're talking about. Their complaint is with thoughts. In this second example, I don't have any time to wake up anymore, but the second example would seem like a prime case for a psychiatrist, for a counselor of some kind, for a marriage counselor, for a psychologist, for somebody to talk to this person. That let's work this out. Work what out? They're not even working on the right problem. Because everyone looks out and goes, well, the problem is what my wife said. I know they'll get a little bit better theoretically. Sometimes they go, well, it's not just what happened to the person in life, it's their reaction to it. Now what we've got to do is take somebody that says they're still replaying a conversation that happened 20 years ago, and that's to the point that they find it disruptive to their life, that's detrimental to their everyday existence. This kind of thing takes time. We're going to have to talk it out. There's no telling what sorts of memories they've repressed. I mean, you know how it goes. As long as the slave's out there in the field, picking the cotton, picking the corn, as long as you can get them to keep looking off and pointing away from the field, you got them. That's all it takes. It doesn't matter whether they periodically go, it seems like we sure are, limited in our movement here. That doesn't matter. As long as they'll keep looking off and talking about faraway places, they'll never see where they are. So, a psychologist. No offense to a psychologist, but they would take the example of this man or woman saying, well, I have been replaying this conversation to the point it goes on, I can't stop it. I've tried everything. And they go, well, this is neat. We're familiar with that. You're not the first to ever do it, but now you're going to have to, you're in for a long haul because we've got to work to pull out the memories and etc. It is so simple to a few after a lifetime of work. There's nowhere to look. There are no memories to suppress. Forget the idea of the husband or wife who left you. Forget the idea of my mind lives in a dark, shadowy place due to my concern, my continuing concern over death. All of it is one complaint. There's only one complaint. They want their thoughts repaired. Thoughts cannot be repaired. Thoughts are not broken. There's nothing to do with them. What they're trying to do is to partially get off a carousel. What they're doing in the ordinary world, you only got a minute, maybe somebody will get it. What they're doing in the ordinary world is damn near an oblique reflection of what those trying to reach another state of consciousness are where they normally get stuck. Because the ordinary, in their attempt to be religious, to be mystical, to pursue a life of self-reflection, all of it is their attempt, unwittingly, to repair their thoughts. No matter what they call it, that's all it amounts to. That's the beginning, that's the end of it, there's nowhere else to go with it. You can just keep repackaging it, renaming it, but that's what it is. But now look at this kind of thwarted reflection. People who would normally consider themselves in a certain conscious way, in a certain humble, or at least not exceedingly grand, vainglorious manner, if they're struggling with the idea of enlightenment, they are unwittingly attempting to repair thoughts. Because what they're attempting to do, or what they're operating, the basis on which they're operating is that my consciousness as it is now, my mental processes, are not as they should be. I should be a Buddha mind, Muhammad mind. I should be of a liberated consciousness. And they don't see it, but they're attempting to do the same thing, is to repair that, which not only cannot be repaired, but is not broken to start with. But as long as you do that, you'll never get off the merry-go-round. You'll never get off the plantation. You're not even giving anybody any problems. Because as long as you're on your knees picking that cotton, life didn't care if you periodically raise up your head and go, by God, I'm had as male and I won't take it anymore. But I did give you the positive side of man's captivity. There is one positive aspect to it, at least, that apparently man's slave master is deaf, dumb, and blind, and totally impartial toward him. I mean, you've got to be even below the level of an ordinary slave, which some people are, of course, but to believe that life has singled you out for this exceptional bad luck. The rest of the time, an ordinary person, if they can be intelligent at all, they got to recognize, and they will, somebody be whining, complaining about, you know, I just bought this dress and look, the waiter spilled stuff on me, and you can say to people, would you realize there are children starving somewhere? And a person will go, oh, you're right, you know, I shouldn't be doing this, never mind. At least until you get out of sight and leave them alone. The point is, ordinary people know that life has not singled them out. That's the positive side. By the way, this is starting tonight, we're having to change the format of the show. I am, the whole approach, because over the weekend, I went into a deep analytic session with a local psychologist. And thanks to her splendid help, she was able to drag out of me certain repressed memories that showed that years ago I had been brainwashed by some cult. And it just finally came to my attention. So I'm going to have to, now that I have wised up, I'm going to have to take a completely different course with this. Either that or sit back on the memories again. But it's too late since I'd already written the news for the night. So one man who for most of his life had been engaged in the search for the secret said that it was a mite easier back when he believed that there was always something else left to know rather than now, when he realized